Good evening to our class, both here in class physically and those of you watching online. I want to pick up because actually we have been going through our lesson, waiting for the ability to get this out to you tonight, and we're here live. But I want to give you the answers. I know some of you have downloaded the notes, and so if our classmates here in class are indulgent and patient enough with me, I'm going to give you the answers to the notes, and then if they miss something, they'll be able to jot something down. And as far as the discussion, I apologize, but at least I'm getting you the notes. We started on note 72. If a person's mind has become reprobate, it is now morally debased and twisted in its thinking. So that individual has lost the ability to discern what is morally right or wrong. They cannot correctly separate good from evil, and they can't judge what is right and wrong. They can't because their mind is so twisted that they see good as evil and evil as good. And we see that happening in our culture today, which lets me know that there is absolutely no doubt that we are living in the last of the last days. Note 73 is describing that verb that says being filled. They're filled with this. And this word is pepleromenos, and it was often used of the wind carrying a ship, catching the sails and then driving the ship. And these people are moved by their depraved minds to engage in unspeakable evil. This word also has a connotation of complete control. God has released these individuals to the debased thinking they desire, and that thinking now totally controls their thoughts and actions. The perfect tense of this verb is speaking of them remaining in a state where they are totally permeated and controlled by an undiscerning, worthless mind. And then Paul goes on in the end of Romans chapter 1 to give a list of those things that are coming out of that kind of attitude, okay? They had this depraved mind, and so they became filled with. Now, as we look at this list, this is not an exhaustive list, but it's examples. And each and every one of us could look at these and say, well, those are things that we even see in some of our own lives. The difference between having some of that, because we are in a tension, right? Flesh and spirit. Paul speaks of that tension. But the difference is, what is the difference between us, who might experience some of that, and what Paul is describing here? Filled with. Filled with. We are not filled with it if we are following Jesus. But we need to stop looking at those people. Oh, those people. That only is seen in those people. No, it can be seen in us, but we're not filled with it. Or we shouldn't be filled with it, right? So, unrighteousness, righteousness reverse, wanting nothing to do with the righteousness that can come only from God. Sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness. And you will notice on your notes, if you have them and you've downloaded them, that I've given you the Strong's numbers so that you can do your own word studies there. maliciousness, full of envy, wanting what someone else has, to the point that you will do anything to get it. And the next one, murder, phonu. Remember, Jesus, the law said, you shall not murder, right? But Jesus took it up a notch. What did he say? He said, if you hate in your heart, and hate is a very, if you look at it in the original languages, hatred is beyond just disliking. There is such a hatred that it almost crosses into wishing murder. Jesus said, you've already murdered them in your heart. You're guilty of murder. But these people are full of murder. And before we actually went online tonight, we were talking about our society that has made it legal to kill the baby in the womb, even up to the moment of conception, and has now gone beyond that in some states. Now some states is if the baby is born, and in consultation between the doctor and the mother does not want the child's life can actually be snuffed out. That can only, by the way, that can only come about with a depraved, reprobate mind. And then there's strife, Eros. Have you ever met people? They just want to keep things stirred up everywhere. They want everybody at everybody else's throats all the time. That's what these people are like. I don't know about you, but sometimes you ever tune into a program on TV, and everybody's talking over everybody else and screaming at each other, and I'm thinking, I can't listen to this. I mean, I'm going to watch some silly program that's mindless over that. I can't handle that. And believe me, there's plenty of that out there too. But strife, just always wanted to stir up strife. And is that not the earmark of our culture right now? Strife, strife, strife. We want everybody mad at everybody else. And then deceit, dolo. One of the comments that I'm hearing so much in the probably the last even 6 months, but have heard before, is there's so much deceit. I don't know what to believe. Ever hear that comment? I don't even know what to believe anymore because there's so much deceit. Evil-mindedness, and then we have our kako word again. Kakotheos. Evil-mindedness. There are just some people who are filled with evil-mindedness. Filled, because that's what this word means. Being filled with this. It's not just a sin that happens once or so. No, they are just evil-filled minds. And when you read of some of the things that are happening, and you say, I can't believe. There are some things I cannot believe one human being would do to another human being. And yet they're happening. Yeah, I think back to when ISIS was very prevalent in the Middle East, and the things they did, putting Christians in cages and setting them on fire. Listen, that did not come from just a person that did something bad. That comes from an evil, filled mind. Whisperers. Say, I'm not a whisperer. Well, that's another word for gossips. It kind of sounds like it. This is sisteristas. It kind of someone trying to know, gossips always don't tell lies. Sometimes they tell the truth, but the truth told with bad intent can beat all the lies one can invent. William Blake, back from the 1800s. Backbiters. We have a term for that in our vernacular, and it's what? Knife stabbers, backstabbers. Slanderers. You have a kata. We know whenever kata is used in the Greek, it does what? It means the ultimate. So, I mean, it's the ultimate slander. It's not just saying something isn't true. It's the ultimate slander of a person. Haters of God. Theo stugais. Hate God. Violent. And then I remember when we read it in the Tree of Life version, we read insolent. And I said that that was a very good translation of this Greek word, hubristis. They've heard of the term, English term, hubris. Okay, all right. But it's that insolent. I believe what I believe, and I'm not going to be corrupted by anybody. That's insolence. And sometimes they don't have to say anything. Sometimes they'll just sit like this. Insolent. Are there people like that? Yes, there are. No matter what you say, no matter what you say about the Lord, no matter what you say about God's love, insolent, proud, arrogant. And this is a hooper, not a hoopo word. Remember, hoopo is stay under, hooper is I'm going to be above everybody. No one can tell me what to do because I'm up here. I'm above everybody. Boasters, alazonas. I'm even going to go into this one because we hear that all over the place today. I mean, my goodness. I mean, we've had all sorts of people boasting about what they did. From I invented the internet to I have stopped the water from flowing. I mean, to I have climbed every mountain. Inventors of evil things. Now, it's not enough just to engage in the evil that exists. I'm going to invent some new evil. Again, kakon. Disobedient to parents. And this is not just a word where they just don't do what you tell them to do, but it's an attitude, a lifestyle. Undiscerning, foolish. Synetos is the Greek word that means to have discernment. So again, you see the A put in front of it, having discernment. It's not just, I'm just ignorant of discernment. No, you're moving in the opposite of discernment, undiscerning. Untrustworthy. Again, you see the same A in front of synthetus. Can't trust them. We live in a world that's very different even from 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. You know, if somebody called you on the phone, well, 70 years ago we didn't have a telephone. We didn't have a telephone. When I went to Bible college, I had already been to university. So I was in Bible college with many students who were younger than I was, a few who were older, a couple my age, but most of them were younger than I was. And I was speaking, I had a teacher, instructor in Bible college, and she had stayed in our home for the district convention. And of course, she happened to be the pastor who was very influential in reaching my father after my brother had died. And he just was kind of going through a difficult time, and faith-wise, because he and my mother were preparing to enter the ministry when my brother died. And my mom found solace in the Lord, and my dad kind of did this number. But anyhow, she was one of the teachers, and so when we had the district convention in Cambridge, she had stayed in our home and had been friends of my parents from then on. And so she was talking about being in our house for that convention and was trying to watch TV, which had a screen like this, and my father would have to go out with a pipe wrench and turn the antenna so that the picture would come in clear. And she was telling, I'm sitting here, right, in the class, and she's telling the class. And when she got done, somebody nudged me and they said, "Did they have roads when you grew up?" I said, "Yes, we had roads." And I said, "But when we had the TV, we didn't have a telephone yet. We didn't have a telephone in that house till later." And then they really thought I was ancient. But when we understand that, at that time, if somebody called you on the phone, that's where I got the phone, was when we had a phone, and they said, "Your child has been hit by a car and they've gone to the hospital, and we've had to admit hang with me, we had to admit your child, but we can't really treat your child until you do give us your credit card that we can put this on your card." Hang with me for a minute. You wouldn't have questioned that at that, even when credit cards first came out. Why? Because there was a general idea that most people were honest. But here we are in an age of this untrustworthiness. You can't trust anyone that tells you anything on the phone. You need to change right now to this electric service company because we can save you $500. I'm sitting in my office a few days ago and my phone rang, not on our line here, but on my cell phone, and I picked it up and thank goodness, because I have spam filter on my phone. And here comes a call, Turkey. And it was a Turkish number, because it had the country code right and the number. And of course the spam filter immediately came up and said, possible scam. And I'm looking, I said, possible scam? This has to be definitely scam. There is no one in Turkey calling me. But that's where we're living now. Unloving. Heartless. Now this is a word I want us to look at because it has a relationship to what we've read previously in Romans 1. In Greek, there are 4 words for love. 4 words for love. Agape. Phileo. Thank you. Phileo. Eros, which is never seen in the Bible. Never used in the Bible. And this one, storge. Now, we know what agape is. That's love with unconditional love, no strings attached. We know phileo love, that's love between brothers, sisters. We have it in the church, phileo love. But it's kind of a you love me, I love you back type love, Then there is Eros, which, like I said, is not used in the Bible. And then there's this one. And this one, the best description of this from the Greek is love between a parent and a child the first moment you see your child. If you've had a child, if you've been a parent, if you're the mother and you've had this child and they lay that child in your arms for the first time, that's what? It's natural. It's that natural love that happens. If you're the father and they come out and they say, would you like to hold your son? The minute that happens and there's a connection there, that's storge. That's natural love. That's what is the natural thing. It would be unnatural not to. So that was used to think of that's what should be. That's the kind of love that should happen, even if you adopt a baby. I remember when my cousin and her husband, they got their daughter one day after she was born. And actually ended up, if you don't know that God knows you even from the womb, it turns out that they named her the same thing her biological mother had named her. And when they went to pick her up, and I want to talk about this story, guy, because the mother was crying. The biological mother was crying, but she knew she could not. And so she asked, she said, what are you planning to name her? And the minute they said, Emily Marie, the nurse, before the mother could say it, said, that's what she named her. But the love that they had the minute that they held her in their hand, that's natural love. You'd think that anything else would be unnatural, right? It would be, because this is your child. This is you've waited, you've prayed. I mean, they prayed, their church prayed for a child for them. And by the way, it's been a real good match, because they've been excellent parents. And she's been a daughter that has been a blessing to them too. And I told you how she went to the mission field and they brought her, they had to come back through Canada and they just got in within hours of avoiding a 14-day quarantine. And they didn't know if they were going to get back. But even with all that said, no, I want to go. I want to go to the mission field. So, but this is that love that is the natural love. And what has Paul been dealing with in Romans chapter 1? Unnatural love, right? This isn't natural. This is what's wrong with it, because it's just not natural. And so he comes in again and says, this comes out of a depraved, reprobate mind when you are unloving, when you are what? Natural love, storge, moved in reverse. Unforgiving. Aspandos. Forgiveness has to be a part of our lifestyle. Why? Because we're Christians. See, once we understand what God has forgiven us, how can we help but forgive? You know, the Bible has a great deal to say about forgiveness. And by the way, we don't just get it and say, oh, bless God, I've got this whole forgiveness thing right down. I'm going to put it in my pocket here, and we're okay. How many know that sometimes you have to deal with forgiveness over and over and over and over again? But we are living in an unforgiving society. And when it comes to forgiveness, Jesus, you know, we all can go back to that incident that happened in the ministry of Jesus when the woman that was caught in the act, supposedly the very act of adultery. I have one question for that. If she was caught in the very act of adultery, where was the man? Why wasn't he dragged? Because if you will look at the law, he was as guilty as she was. And Jesus made a statement. He said, okay, fine, but he that is without sin, cast the first stone. There isn't one of us sitting here tonight who is not a flawed human being. And I raised both of my hands. So here's what I'm saying. Were there individuals who made mistakes in their lives? Yes. We hear a lot about Thomas Jefferson. And I would simply ask the culture in which we're living today, have you ever made a statement that was a good statement, but even in your own life you contradicted the statement you made? But does that negate the statement? There are people today serving the Lord, some of them preaching the gospel. And there was some disconnect at times in their lives between the gospel they preached and the way they lived their life. But please hear me right now, it did not negate the truth of the gospel. The gospel. See, there has to come a forgiveness. Now, we don't continue in the same sin. Do you understand that? There has to be what? Repentance and God forgiveness that comes from God. But understand, we are living in a culture that says if something happened way back there, that person is still guilty. I don't know a person's heart. I know people who made mistakes. I would simply say this. How many of you like the song Amazing Grace? How many like the song? How many do not like the song Amazing Grace? Who knows the background to the story of Amazing Grace? I rest my case. Although some people would say, he wasn't deserving. Do you know when you can be so, and this doesn't come in unforgiving, but back during the Reformation, and I believe it was Wycliffe. If I'm wrong, it's either Tyndale or Wycliffe. I believe it was Wycliffe. They hated him so much for translating the Bible to English that the man had been dead. Kind of interesting, isn't it? He had been dead for a long time. And they dug up his bones and burned them and threw them in the river. Hello, the Bible was still translated into English.
Yes.
You didn't stop a thing, and besides, he's already in glory with the Lord, and all you've done is shown your own, I don't know what, hatred to the nth degree. And then we get to merciless. And you see the eleomonas word there. That is a word that we use for charity, but it's showing mercy, which you do when you show charity. And it says these people are merciless. Notice the A again, moving it in reverse. So now in 32, verse 32, like I said, I've given you the Strong's words. I would strongly urge you on your own time to look at some of these words. Again, we have the Greek word epinontes. And this was not just a casual knowledge. This was a word that means to have a full knowledge. Full knowledge. To know with certainty. So if you know with certainty, you're probably like people who've said that I know that God's word is true. I know God. And that's knowledge gained by experience. It's not, you're not saying, well, I know God based, I know about God. No, you have a personal relationship with him. You have experience with him. You have personal knowledge. So these people are fully acquainted with, and they have been effectively made aware of God's righteous judgment. They're not ignorant of the fact that God will judge sin. And by the way, God will judge sin. He has either judged our sin on Christ at the cross, or there is judgment coming. But God will judge sin. Righteous judgment is dikaioma. And again, you see the dikaio word there, which means righteous. It means a righteous requirement or decree. There had to be a payment made, and the payment wasn't made to Satan. When Jesus died on the cross and shed his blood, that was to satisfy a righteous God who said, the soul that sins shall die, and without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. That was a righteous requirement on God's part. And therefore, there will come a righteous decree of judgment in the end. So, Paul is saying here, in summing up the first chapter of Romans, is they know that the things they practice are wrong. They know they're wrong. They have a full and complete knowledge they're wrong. They are not just, oh, I didn't know that. You know, there's a difference between coming up to an intersection where they just put up new stop signs, and you know, you've been going through that intersection for maybe 20 years, and you're just going down and you go right through it. And say, oh, I didn't know that was there. And seeing the sign that says speed limit 35, and you say, I gotta get there before they close. I mean, you know, there's a difference. Because you knew. You can't say, oh, I didn't know that was the speed limit. No, you knew. And they're two different things. One's a sin of ignorance and maybe carelessness, because you're just so used to the muscle memory of driving home that you just, well, there's no stop sign there. And being deliberately disobedient. I know someone says, stop that. Stop putting that on us. But they know, and they know that they're deserving of death. Why? Because they know these people are people who have known God's word and God's law. But this knowledge does not deter them from indulging in these forms of ungodliness. And they're listed there. They are not exhaustive, but some examples are listed there. And in fact, these rejectors of truth unite with others to promote ungodly behavior and give their stamp of hearty approval. Oh, that's wonderful. To their sinful activity. Do we see that today? Oh, yeah. Oh. Oh, I'm so glad you're doing this. And they do this. They hardly applaud people who give themselves to sin. Doing so causes those people, the ones who are applauding it, oh, I am so thankful, and I want you to know I support you, and I'm here, and I'm so glad you're out there doing this and saying this, and now it is very open. And actually, when the people applaud and say, yeah, you come out, it's great, they become more degraded than those they are observing. Why? They're promoting it.
What's the one right before degraded?
Applaud. And understand, these are not sins of ignorance. Well, I just didn't know. They're not sins of ignorance, but they are blatant rebellion. And I just want to go briefly and refer back to the Revelation chart. Remember, we said that God reveals his nature and his will through creation. And we looked at that both subjectively and objectively. And then through Christ, subjectively, objectively. There is enough knowledge there to know what is and is not natural. So this is not a sin of ignorance. And this verse clearly states that these people have inner knowledge from God, and that should be a capital G, that's a typo, that their ways deserve and must have divine condemnation and judgment. They know that. This verse clearly states that these people have inner knowledge from God that their ways deserve and must have divine condemnation and judgment. That's divine, that's from God. Yes?
What was the answer to 80?
80 are rebellion. These are not sins of ignorance, but of blatant rebellion. It's kind of a, I don't care what God says. It's almost like Dante, who said, or no, I take it back. It was actually Milton, believe it or not, who said but he was trying to explain Lucifer's rebellion, and so he had him saying, I'd rather be a ruler in hell than a servant in heaven. And some people actually have read that and taken that and, well, that's, and justify their actions. It was never meant, Paradise Lost. It was never meant to be like that. He was just saying how blatant it was. And people, which again shows the reprobate mind, jumped on that, have quoted it. That's what I'm going to be like. They persist in their practices in spite of the clear witness of their consciences. Remember the Revelation chart? There's a conscience that God has put in every human being. That there's that twinge. This isn't natural. It's not right. It's wrong. And they persisted in spite of that. They are in a fellowship of evil with other evil doers. My daddy had a saying that he would say in the church often. He was speaking of the fellowship of the church and having fellowship within the church. He said, well, you really can't have fellowship until you get in the other fellow's ship. In other words, you've got to, there's got to be some connection. And so when you think about that, guess what happens? The people who are plotting, the people who are promoting, the people who are supporting have gotten in the other ship. Man is in dire straits, and only the gospel of Jesus Christ can set men and women free from bondage of such evil. It can. It is powerful. But only the gospel can do that. So I'm going to finish up with 85 and 86. The purpose of the first chapter of Romans is to show all people the love of God against the backdrop of human rebellion. God didn't give up on mankind. His love was there. That's why we can say, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. The gospel of Jesus Christ, which tells us of the atoning work of Christ. For it is the power of God unto salvation, to the Jew first and also to the Gentile. It was for these people, the very people that Paul is describing here, for those people that Jesus Christ came. Jesus said, listen, I have come for the lost sheep. I haven't come for the well, I've come for the sick. He gave his life that through the power of the gospel, the power of his atoning work, and the atoning work of Christ is still powerful today. That us and those people might experience restoration and be brought back into fellowship with God. That's the fellowship we are to have with God. And there isn't one of us who hasn't participated in some degree in some of the things mentioned in Romans 1. Remember we read that passage where it said, "And such were some of you, that now you are fully cleansed." But God demonstrated his love for us in that while we were still sinners, we're still sinners, when we're still sinners. By the way, we're not a sinner because we sin. We sin because we've been born a sinner. We've been born in a condition of sin. But while we were still sinners, he didn't wait for you to clean yourself up. He didn't wait for you to, well, I'm going to do everything I can do, and then when I can't do, God, you can step in. No, he did what only he can do. Christ died for us while we were still sinners. And this is the proof of God's amazing love. Questions or comments? Yes.
When you were talking about the evil in this world, it seems like we came to full circle because I was reading in Genesis in the beginning, and it was saying that before the flood, that the thoughts of men were just continually evil, and how much it just grieved God's heart. It really grieved his heart that he had made man.
Yes.
So if it weren't for that covenant of the
That's
rainbow,
That's right.
he remembers that.
You know, when you were, Mr. Charmaine was making the comment about Genesis, before the flood. And the Bible makes it very clear that the men's minds and thoughts were continuously evil. So evil that God repented that he had made man. And here we are. And we are in the state we are in. I'm talking about us, I mean, as a people, mankind is in the state it's in because of the decision to move in reverse of coming to God. And what was there? Well, we don't need that anymore. That's why I really truly believe, that's why I really truly believe we are in the last days. I really, really believe that. Share your comment.
It kind of reminds me of what our study in Jude do. You know, the way and then as I was listening today on teaching of Jude, and the person took me back to Psalms 136, and it was just like Jude was telling me, just like the days of old.
That's
you know,
right.
you're turning away from God. You know, I want more. Oh, that wasn't enough. Also, you know, and it just that's what the world's doing now.
That's right. And that's why, as I said in the sequence that we studied them, I said, you understand why Jude was placed in the canon of Scripture just before the book of Revelation. Now, can you see why I believe that the church needs to read the book of Jude for the time in which we're living, as well as the book of Romans? Because listen, the gospel of Jesus Christ, the atoning work of Jesus Christ is the only answer. It's the only one. Any other questions or comments? I hope you got your tests if you wanted them. And next Wednesday we will be, please get your tests in if possible within the next 2 weeks. I know it takes time to study. And then next week, we are going to be starting on Romans chapter 2. And so, we don't have any other questions. I will say good night. God bless each one of you for tuning in. And we'll be sitting here looking at you next Wednesday night.